Two friends meet up to drink some beers and talk about past times. Not yesterday, but long ago, it's scandals, wars and crimes. From Stalin's reign to Prohibition, Tudors, Pompey, Bush and NASA's mission, Edison's bulk, Genghis Khan's rise to victory. Forget your old teacher, it's time for Pint-Sized History.
Hi there, and welcome to the Pint-Sized History podcast. I'm Joe.
And I'm Zack.
And we're here today to chat more about the history we know and love with a few pinty winties, like the one I'm holding in my hand right this very second.
And the one I'm holding too.
Oh my god, you're holding a Crate Brewery pint glass. I didn't think you had those. I thought you'd lost it somehow, but you have one too?
I have one too, yes, absolutely. As you know, in Panthers history, we love a drink of alcohol. And I'm getting very excited thinking about it.
That's a sign of alcoholism. Jesus Christ. No, me too. And thank you once again to Crate for that lovely pint glass, which, I mean, actually, have a look at it. I don't know if you can buy these if you go to Crate itself, but it's actually very nice. And I've used it quite a lot now. We've had, how many episodes has this been? Like the 40s at this point for episodes.
It's our 46th and 47th episode.
Oh my god, I've just realised we're going to be approaching a 50, aren't we? We've got to do something special for the 50.
Yeah, probably. We get Troy back.
Yeah. Our greatest hits. That's where we're at. Yeah, you're right, this is our 46th. Wow, okay. So, we really need to start thinking about what we're going to do for the big 50. But what are we doing for number 46? What are we going to be talking about?
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell the listeners what we're doing for the episode. The 46th episode of Pint-Sized History, if they kindly go and like and subscribe and review 5 stars our podcast on whatever platform they use it from. Because, you know, we actually really quite, at this stage, need the engagement. Absolutely.
Yeah,
and, you know, like our videos or TikTok or repost them, and maybe we'll get back to the studios and being fucking bums sitting in our computer rooms.
I know what you were saying, but I did not understand a word of that. You know, and we'll be sending the palms and we'll be doing the baby. I knew what you were talking about with the podcast room.
All right, who cares? Who cares? Right, Joe. So today we're talking about something that we love to frequent. It's another World War II episode, and you know we always go back to World War II, and we always do say that it's top, like, I don't know, top 3, top 2. I personally think it's the most exciting history has ever been. And yeah, as we're close to World War III these days, you could potentially argue it seems kind of fitting to go back to World War II so we can learn a bit of the lessons about why war is fucking hell and why you don't want to go back to situations like this. Even though there is like massive wars happening right now in Europe that kind of resemble or are very close to where this episode is going to take place. History is so important because, like, how else do you learn from the sins of the past? It's so important just to know, like, where we went wrong and how we can do it again. And we seem to be slowly making all the same mistakes we did last time. But this time,
as all the people that actually fought in the war or was there during the war have started dying off, now it seems like we're just going to repeat ourselves straight away, which is very, very exhausting to see. But it really doesn't seem like there's much we can do about it. I mean, some experts claim that World War III has already begun. So by that logic, yeah, I don't know either, but it's difficult because World War III in theory is going to be a different war than the previous. So maybe we are. Maybe
a lot of atypical war as well. Like it's not going to be asymmetrical war, whatever it's called.
Proxy.
Yeah.
Bigger powers and small powers. You're absolutely right. And I suppose this battle isn't bigger powers and small powers. These are two heavyweights that are battling it out here in the Battle of Kursk, which I imagine of all the World War II subjects we've done so far, this is probably the thing that is known or at least heard of the least, I would guess.
Yeah, which is interesting because, like, ultimately, this is probably the most important battle of the Second World War. I went into this episode I do think that I went into the research in this episode thinking this was probably, you know, is it more important than the Battle of Moscow or the Battle of Stalingrad? It's definitely one of the battles that happened on the Eastern Front. The Eastern Front is by far the biggest front of the war. Like the most is happening there, the most bodies and equipment and lives are lost and decisions are made that have ramifications throughout the war. But I hope you'll eventually come around to listen to me waffle on for about an hour about why this probably is the most important battle of the war. I think it genuinely is more important.
What you're saying is
a case, yeah, but I think it probably is more important than Stalingrad. And I thought Stalingrad was the be-all and end-all in the Second World War. But if Stalingrad was the reason why the Germans didn't win the war, Kursk is almost certainly the reason why the Germans eventually lost the war. The immense toll and casualties and decision making and loss of life and equipment and tanks and airplanes that happens in Kursk just make the end of the war seem completely inevitable. Stalingrad, they're still coming from a point of strength. there's still the opportunity for the Germans to go on the offensive. By the end of Kursk, the offensive capability of the Wehrmacht, which is the German army and the Luftwaffe, is completely decimated. Yeah. And it's all because of this just intense battle that happens over this field, this 100-kilometer field, basically, on the edge of Russia.
Let's just bring it back for a second. So we're talking about World War II, we're talking about the Eastern Front. Are we talking about... So we're talking... If that is not clear, that means we're talking about the Soviets versus the Germans.
Yeah.
Is this battle after Stalingrad? Like, I know they're very close, but...
I'll give a quick rundown. So the Battle of Kursk is about what happens between July and August 1943. Stalingrad happens in 1942. It goes a bit into 1943, but basically it's all done and dusted by the end of 1942 as the 6th Army are encircled. And it's essentially the final aggressive assault by the Wehrmacht on the Eastern Front in World War II in the middle of 1943. It's the biggest battle in history, not just biggest battle in World War II, the biggest battle in history. And arguably as well the biggest tank battle in history.
So, okay, yeah. So I knew if you were to ask me what I knew about Kursk, which I don't know much at all about Kursk, but I do know that it is the biggest tank battle, or at least the biggest armors battle in history. But you just said it's the biggest battle in history. What do you mean? Yeah, by that? Well, I definitely would not have guessed that.
Yep. So there's almost 3 million men that are deployed at Kursk. There's almost into the tens of thousands of tanks, and there's almost 5,000 aircraft deployed by both sides over this battle, which lasts literally just a month and a half. The numbers and the scale are beyond any comprehension, and it is over basically a 100-kilometer stretch of land from Oriel in the north to Kharkov, I think. Bryansk as well in the south, with Kursk sitting right in the middle, with a couple of villages around that are really important. It is, you can check yourself in Google now. I know you like to fact check me while I'm talking, Joe, but if you want to type in right now into Google biggest battle in history, Kursk should come up.
Well, I'm actually not going to type that because I truly believe you. I wouldn't have been able to tell you what the biggest battle in terms of numbers is, so I do absolutely believe you. What I wanted to ask next, which I guess I will just ask you instead, is where exactly is this? If we're counting before the Russian invasion of Ukraine a few years ago, is Kursk in Ukraine or is it in Russia? This is before
Kursk is in Russia. Kursk is in Western Russia.
But it's very close to the Ukrainian border.
Yeah. Well, Kharkiv, which is Kharkov. I'll be calling it Kharkov today. Right. But it's Kharkiv or whatever. I think the actual pronunciation is.
So it's right on the border, basically.
Right on the border. Yeah, right on the border. I think recently the Ukrainian army pushed into Kursk, into parts of the Kursk
Oblast. I remember hearing that like a year ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, they pushed in there. Yeah, they went to make the Russian army basically redeploy forces from the front line in the south to the north. So they pushed in there to basically take their mind off what was happening in the south, which is like a bloodbath there, like Avdiivka.
Hitler would be loving that. Bit of fucking civil war.
Absolutely would, yeah.
In his grave, going like,
civil war. Are you suggesting that Ukrainians and Russians are the same people?
Well, no, from his perspective, the Soviets are civil warring themselves. They'd be like, oh, here we go, fine. This is what I was hoping that would happen, but instead they banded together to fight me.
Yeah, Too right.
I don't. By the way, Ukraine, I don't actually think you're part of the same country. I can't stand what Russia are doing to you. Love you.
Love you guys. Love you.
Slava Ukraine. I was about to say Sika Bliet. Slava Ukraine. That's not what we're talking about. That's
no, we're talking about the Battle of Kursk. It is a history podcast after all. It's not a news podcast. It's not a politics podcast. It's a history podcast.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, a few years ago when we were talking about history, that with nothing particularly big was happening. I mean, obviously lots of things big were happening all the time, but like right now, history is changing so quickly that I feel like we just constantly have to bring it back to like the modern day.
Yeah, we're watching history unfold before our eyes. But yeah, we're going back anyway. We're going back to 1941, 2 years before the Battle of Kursk. The Germans have invaded Russia as part of Operation Barbarossa, and they made exceptional gains, getting straight to the doorsteps of Moscow by around October 1941. They utilised Blitzkrieg, which is, Joe?
Lightning War.
Lightning War. It's basically really quick mobile warfare spearheaded by Panzer divisions and bombing runs by the Luftwaffe, and it's like combined arms warfare with... Yeah, infantry on the ground, cracked up to the gills, taking speed and meth. The German soldiers literally took meth to like go on the offensive for days at a time, executing these crazy tasks. And they've gone so far into Russia, at the gates of Moscow, but they failed to take Moscow. So Operation Barbarossa is over. So they commit to something called Fall Blau, or Case Blue. Fall Blau, which is Case Blue in German. The plan is to capture the oil fields of the Caucasus, but Hitler gets distracted by Stalin City, Stalingrad, the name of Stalin on the city, and he goes, I need to capture this completely irrelevant city that is... Yeah, I want a piece of that. That is really good. That does. That lovely city with that name. I just hate that name. Take it off the map. I bet it would have been Hitlergrad or something, or Hitlerstadt.
But the biggest irony, though, is that, like, you could argue that Stalin, if he didn't have a huge narcissistic ego, could just been like, all right, fine. But instead he was like, no, we are not letting them take Stalingrad. That's my name. So he, like, forces every single civilian to stay in there and fight for their lives, which is fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable. After 6 months of incredibly horrible fighting, the Germans lose their entire 6th Army. There are approximately 1.5 million casualties in the higher end for the Germans, and the Soviets have casualties around 2.5 million men at the higher end on their side. And importantly, Joe, there are far more Soviets than there are Germans. And eventually, the Soviets win the battle following General Zhukov's brilliant Operation Uranus, which forces a path around the Germans stuck in the city by pushing through the weaker Axis troops like the Romanians and the Italians to surround Stalingrad. And they push the Germans and the Axis back, up to the Don River, basically. And after this, you have then Operation Little Saturn, which is basically the final Soviet counteroffensive of the wider Battle of Stalingrad, and it pushes the Germans even further back, and they begin battering the Italian lines, and they're plunging the German lines in this sector into absolute chaos. So the Germans are falling back, and the Soviets have made massive territorial gains. And then towards at the start of 1943, this kind of all stops, and the offensives stop happening. But what you do have until this point is a huge Soviet salient. Do you know what salient is, Joe?
Like when there's troops are spread too thin, basically.
A salient is a bulge on the map. It just looks like an excess. So if you look top down at a map, salient will basically look like a protrusion from the front line. So that's what happens when you push really quickly, really fast. You have like an uneven front line, and you develop this thing called a salient, which basically pushes out part of your line further than the rest of it. It's great in some instances because you can make breakthroughs and continue pushing in what could be very dogged and like dug in front lines. It gives you the opportunity to break through. But what it does leave is like intense vulnerability on your sides, because literally you're pushed out. On either side there is the enemy line, and you were just pushing deeper and deeper, exposing yourself to fighting from all three sides. The inside of the secure will be the side behind you. So what happens after the Battle of Stalingrad and the intense Soviet counteroffensives that happen after it? They've created this salient, and it's 160 miles wide and 120 miles deep into German-held territory. And this is eventually going to become the target of the Germans in something called Unternehmen Zitadelle.
Unternehmen Zitadelle.
You asked me what Unternehmen something meant a few episodes ago, or maybe 10 episodes ago. Unternehmen is operation.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And Zitadelle?
Well, that sounds like Citadel, but
Citadel. Yeah.
Oh, it is.
And this is the main kind of talking point of what starts the Battle of Kursk, this eventual kind of struggle between the Germans and the Soviets in this around the salient.
It's basically a German attempt to regain the momentum because they've seen the tiniest bit of overextension that they think is overextension by the Soviets, and now they're really hoping that they can take advantage of it, because right now it's looking a little bit dicey for them. Is the situation, right?
Yeah, basically the Germans are completing this initiative. They're on the back foot. They're retreating at like a ridiculous pace, but the salient represents this like opportunity. While it's like quite problematic for them because it represents this area that the Soviets can push through quite easily, it's very easy to envelop. It's very easy to cut off both sides, pincer it, and then trap, like, probably in this instance, somewhere like 1 million troops, which is like devastating to the Red Army. That's something they wouldn't be able to recover from, and it means that essentially they would, if you just lose 1 million men and equipment and troops at very little gain, at the drop of a hat, they would have to probably spend around half a year trying to like reinforce and regain that manpower, if you didn't intend that to happen. That's why pockets are really important in war. If you get a pocket and you trap these defenders without any resources, they'll eventually run out of ammo, run out of food. You can starve them out. You can take them very, very quickly, massive prisoners of war to fuel your slave labor economy back home. At all costs, you basically want to stop a pocket from forming, stop this pincering from happening. And in the lead up to summer 1943, Hitler kind of initially wants to take a step back, and he actually, I didn't realize this, rather than wanting to like kind of go on the offensive straight away, he wants to take a step back. And there's some of the massive defeat in Stalingrad. They're running out of men, equipment, and oil. So he's hoping to draw the Soviets into an attritional war. But attritional war is basically where, it's a long war, and you hope that the Soviets attack you, and you dwindle down their numbers by forcing them to offensives, until the front basically becomes a stalemate, where you can keep reinforcing and keep innovating and bring new technology to the front line, which can break the deadlock. The wars are like incredibly costly, so that's what Hitler basically wants to do. But there is this campaign season that happens in spring and summer 1943. And that's when a lot of the battles are actually fought in war. They're fought in the summer and the spring months because the ground is firm and you can actually do something. So he decides to kind of opt away from that after speaking to his generals, and they basically decide to center their activities around this town called Kursk.
So it's a town?
A city, sorry, yeah. The city of Kursk. At the same time, Stalin and his generals are very worried about the Kursk salient, and they want to go on operations on either side of the salient by pushing through Kharkiv to the south and Oriel to the north. But instead, General Marshal Zhukov convinces Stalin to build fortifications around the Kharkiv salient, hoping to draw in the Germans' armour before eventually going on the offensive after they massively destroyed a very weakened Wehrmacht. Well, I love Zhukov. I absolutely love him. You know, he's
so
he's
it's
the one...
2 back-to-back go-to plays from Zhukov. He's upping himself in the commander fucking top 100 commanders of our time, eh? Jesus.
Watch Motion's top 100 commanders.
Yeah, I mean, Zhukov's got B. Sounds like
Zhukov, the Chelsea left winger.
Zhukov is got to be in the, well, I have no idea, but he's got to be in the number, right? Top 100, maybe even top 20. I don't really know enough about Zhukov. I just know that there's 2 big decisions he's made that's really helped the Soviets in the biggest war of their time. Go to Zhuki. Go on. What's he cooking?
Zhukov's just spotted that the Germans are going to come and try and pinch the salient in Kursk. And he's been like, let's not push. Let's not keep pushing just yet. Let's hold off because the Germans will come. They will spot this. They'll think they'll be too arrogant and think they can push through and pincer the north and south and corner us and poke us. What we'll do is we'll just construct like 3 lines of fortifications and we'll get 300,000 people to help build them, most of whom are women, and we'll make massive anti-tank lines and just absolutely slaughter the German tanks as they come through. And, essentially, without spoiling it, he gets the call absolutely spot on. What I didn't realise also, another thing I didn't realise before looking into Kursk, and it's part of the reason I guess we have this podcast, is to learn about what happens in history and what actually happens beyond our superficial belief of it. But I thought prior to Kursk or researching it, that Hitler is getting incredibly paranoid and he's getting drug-addled and he's like really ideological and he's just trying to launch operations for the sake of it and just do things based on like a vibe. And I imagine the Soviets as well were like far less prepared than they were, and were kind of just like throwing men and bodies and artillery, not really caring about the consequences of just going human wave offensives. But I guess it's obviously now I'm saying it in retrospect, it seems obvious, but both sides know exactly what they're doing and they know exactly what the other wants to do. German reconnaissance has shown that the Soviets have heavily dug in around the salient. They're ready to defend it and they know that, and they'll attack anyway because they know based on their doctrine of how they engage fortifications that they're strong enough to defeat them. And the Soviets understand it. They build like literally thousands of kilometers of trenches and defensive positions ready for this, and both sides have preliminary bombardments of the other before the battle starts, and they're all just like, they're all incredibly tuned into the detail. The intelligence and reconnaissance is excellent, and both sides know exactly what's going to happen. And I think when you think about some of the wars that have happened in history throughout World War I and World War II, you might think there's very little preparations actually happen to go into it. But yeah, you kind of prove yourself wrong and feel like an idiot when you realise that I guess these generals do care about their men and do care about winning the war effectively in a clean way, or a way that leaves them, they don't want a Pyrrhic victory. They want a victory that's critical and clear.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to banter, well, especially the Nazis, to be fair, both the Soviets and the Nazis, for how they act at times. It's very easy to have a laugh about the high command and all. But at the end of the day, like, the vast majority of the people, especially in the military, that are here in this moment making decisions, have got there because they've made their way there. Like, they know what they're doing, they've planned for it, they've gotten the experience necessary. So in reality, of course, many of them are just going to make the decision that's clear to them and what they're going to do. But
you're totally right. It's just inevitable that there's going to be a battle here. The Russians know they can bait the Germans in and kind of expose them to the salient and then use it as a chance to counterattack. And the Germans know that they need to take the salient if they're going to win the war on the Eastern Front, which is looking very improbable now. But this represents an opportunity to them. One thing the Germans are, though, is incredibly arrogant about their technological advances and the skill of their military. I think that they can just do this because they are pushing into some heavily fortified terrain here. But they're just saying, it doesn't matter. We're the Aryan race. We have the technological superiority. We've got the doctrinal superiority, we will win this fight.
Is that the propaganda? Is that them smelling their own shit often enough that they're like, man, this kind of smells good?
Partially, yeah. I guess, yeah, obviously they're not the monster race and they're not like far better and far stronger and far superior to the Russians, but they do have a large technological advantage. They do have a firepower advantage. They are trained better. Their doctrine is clearer. But I guess one thing that doesn't suit them as opposed to their Soviet counterparts is they haven't really got the freedom of operation that their Russian counterparts do. The Soviet counterparts. Sorry, I keep saying Russian counterparts, and when I do, just ignore me and pretend I'm saying Soviets. But yeah, the Soviets are able to act without, Hitler or Stalin giving them the go-ahead. They have operational freedom on the ground. It's very often overlooked, but that is incredibly important on the ground. Like the ability for generals and majors and even captains down to the sergeant level to be able to act without approval really quickly as a fight develops on the ground is so important. Right, so let's talk a little bit about tanks, because this is the tank battle. After all, it's the biggest tank battle in World War II, biggest tank battle that's ever happened in history. So let's look at the German tanks. The Germans tanks are far superior to the Soviet tanks. They have tanks like the Elefant or Third Man, and importantly, Joe, you'll probably know this one.
Panzer or Tiger?
The Tiger, well, they're Panzers and Tigers. You're right, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you know about the Tiger?
It's the best tank around.
Best tank probably ever made.
The Americans see in Iran, there's just like a World War II German Tiger tank slowly running. Fuck, it's not a Tiger! It's not a Tiger!
Get the fuck back!
Get down!
Yeah, it looks sick too. It looks iconic. It's like, the Tiger, they got the Tiger. They were like really heavy tanks with very thick armor, huge guns with long range firepower. They've got about 150 of them and 90 Elefants by the time of the Battle of Kursk. Like you said, the Panzer 3 and 4s make up the bulk of the German tank strength.
It's an impressive selection of animals. What actual tanks do they have?
That's right, I joked sit there.
Fair play. Like, they got some elephants in there, they got some tigers, some panthers. I mean, that's pretty impressive. But like in terms of the actual tanks, because this is known as a tank battle, what are they cooking with?
You do know that a Panzer doesn't mean panther.
It must do.
A Panzer literally translates to armor, plating, or shell.
Oh, that's boring. I thought they named all their tanks after animals because that's fucking
the panther,
the
tiger, growl.
That's what I mean. That's
the elephant,
cool. The elephant's the big one. I imagine an elephant's like the really armored one.
Yeah, and super heavy tanks. I think.
That's what I mean. It's cool. What's that? I don't know. I think that's sick.
The Germans also brought around 500 Stug 3s, which are armored support vehicles, and I imagine they have loads of half tracks too, and they're essentially cheap and quick to produce. In total, the Germans bring around 2,500 tanks and assault vehicles to the fight, approximately 70% of all their tanks on the Eastern Front. And the war is dominated by tank warfare and aerial superiority. So it's important to realise just how significant that number is. Like your entire reserves of tanks away for this fight.
So the Soviets, what are they cooking with? Some polar bears, grizzly bears, maybe a few penguins.
Bit of koala.
Koala? There's no fucking koala. There's no koalas in Russia. What the hell are you talking about?
The mountain lion tank.
The mountain lion tank. The Siberian tiger tank. It's just their own tiger tank, but Siberian.
It's white and black and striped. Is that what Siberian tigers have? They're like white and black.
They're not white. I think they're orange and they're still from Siberia. They are from Siberia, but they're really gorgeous orange coat. Is Siberian tiger. Isn't that the biggest? Sorry, now we're just pint-sized nature, but is the Siberian tiger not the biggest tiger?
Pint-sized nature.
Pint-sized nature.
What's your fetish today with animals as human weaponry?
Well, I started thinking about it. You said the elephants and the tigers, and I just thought, man, that's really cool,
elephants.
Germany.
Oh, tigers.
Say what you want about the Nazis, but they had style. Yeah, the Siberian tiger is recognised as the largest tiger subspecies. So I just wanted to double check that in case, pint-sized nature fans just wanted to know. So yeah, the Russians had access to the biggest tiger around. So really, they should be bringing out their own tigers if the tiger tanks of the Germans are cooking. That's all.
And this leads me to my next quiz question, Joe. What are the top 5 animals in the world?
Oh, well, Siberian tiger's right up there. Biggest tiger subspecies.
No. We're not doing this. So the Soviet tanks, what they lack in firepower and armor in relation to their German counterparts, they made up for reliability and maneuverability. You got the experimental KV-1 heavy tank, which actually doesn't see much action in this fight, and the T-70 light tank. They're just entering service. They're not really tested very well. There's a couple of them at the Battle of Kursk. What you do have, importantly, when I think of tanks, I think of this particular tank, and it's a Soviet T-34 tank. It is just iconic. It's fast, it's quick, it's reliable, it has these wide tracks, this powerful engine, it has this sloped armor plating. in basically every war film ever made about World War II that has the Soviets featuring in some way, the T-34 will be there as a capacity. Importantly, though, it's quite weak. It has like very, very shit armor. It's got very weak firepower, but it has fantastic suspension and a strong engine. So it can drive. It's also very importantly, very cheap and easy to produce. So they can make thousands, tens of thousands of them. By the end of the war, they made 84,000 34s. In relation to the Tigers, there's probably only a couple of thousands of them at the very most. And importantly, like I said before, there's sloped armor, which means that anti-tank rounds essentially bounce or redirect off its front sloping. And if you're hitting it from long range, you're not going to do. You might not score a critical hit on it because it might bounce off, but really the Tiger has such fantastic firepower that pretty much one direct hit on the T-34 will render it done. Wow. So it makes it a really interesting battle conceptually. You have these like fairly simple basic tanks against this really sophisticated German machinery. Apparently, according to some historians, typically you need around 5 to 7 T-34s to take out just one of some of the German Panzers because of their superior range, firepower, and armor. But that is built into their doctrine. Their doctrine is like overwhelm, like get around the sides, flank them, get behind the Tigers where their armor is far weaker, hit the tracks and hit the back of it. I don't know if you've seen the film Fury, but they had the situation of 3 M4 Shermans, which are medium tanks and do not have a gun big enough to like really penetrate Tiger armor. They say get around the back. It's where the armor's weakest. And I think that actually historically is true. The way to tackle a Tiger would be 2 around the sides, 1 head on, maybe 1 come around the back flanking. And that's kind of how you take out a Tiger. And you can see the damage the Tiger does when it hits one of those tanks, just blows in smithereens. It also might be slightly over-exaggerated, but supposedly SS Oberscharführer Franz Staudinger, in his single Tiger, took out up to 22 T-34s at Kursk before retreating. So we talked a little about the tanks and the background and how we got to Kursk, but now let's actually talk about the operations at Kursk. You know, what the plan of action from the German side and the Soviet side looks like. I've roughly said what it is. But on 30th of March, Hitler signs Operational Order Number 5, authorizing offensives against the Soviets in 1943, particularly with one of them against the Kursk salient. Operation Citadel is the name given to this. It was basically a pincer movement against the north and south face of the salient with an armoured spearhead, like you're making there, Joe, to isolate the Soviets and destroy them in the pocket that they made. The Germans want to get going straight away in March. Hitler absolutely does. But generals on the ground are resisting because they know they're a bit understrength and outgunned. And he's having meetings with Manstein and Guderian, and Guderian is telling him that we need to go straight away or we don't go at all. But generals on the ground are resisting because they're understrength and outgunned. So Hitler's not this like all-consuming person that I think we think he is, that he's like so crazy that he'll just go without against the advice of his generals. He's got people talking to him on either side of the equation saying like, let's go right now, let's wait a bit. The Germans are exhausted and the generals are basically just saying postpone. So they postpone to the 3rd of May, and it's postponed again from the 3rd of May until the 12th of June as they wait for better tanks, for more Tigers and more Panthers and more Elephants to basically be put through production and join the battle. In the meantime, Manstein is saying that the Germans need to attack immediately. He's saying we need to go right now. You know, we stop the Russians from building up their defenses. We need to push in. We'll be able to take them, basically. If they have any more time, it's going to make this plan a bad mess. It's going to fail. They'll figure out what our plans are. They essentially have anyway. But now is as good a time to go as ever. Heinz Guderian, on the other hand, is saying, let's just stop it completely. And he's saying if we do go ahead with this, it would degrade the Panzer forces, which are needed for the defense of Western Europe.
And if you were there, you'd be saying the same. You would be agreeing. You'd be saying the same thing to Adolf.
I'm saying go immediately. I think.
You're saying go immediately.
You're going to lose the war if you don't fight. You know, you're going to be just taking on the heat and waves of Russian armor, and they're getting stronger and quicker, and
they're building these tanks.
Their factories, and exactly. You're just going to be swarmed by them. So like the best chance you have is to attack the salient and isolate this pocket of like 1 million Russians, whatever it is, in this I guess Ukrainians and Belarusians and Latvians, Lithuanians, Estonians, capture them in this pocket and kind of wipe them out. That's your really only hope to be able to hold the front. That's what I would probably be saying, or just don't do it at all. But really, the best option on the table is probably to just get it going, get it done. General Patton has famously said in the past before, a good plan executed violently now is better than a perfect plan executed next week. And there's probably some truth to that. But anyway, there's this kind of whole debate in the German High Command, the German Army, and the Chief of Staffs about what they do. And Heinz Guderian and Hitler meet, and Heinz Guderian tells them, like, I don't know about this plan, this doesn't seem right. And Hitler goes, I know, the thought of it turns my stomach, which is crazy. You know, we all think he's going mad by this point. He's addicted to drugs and he's going mental, but he has this like strength of self and this like awareness to still like know what's happening. And
to be fair, it's only 43, right? Like the kind of weak, drug-addled version of Hitler I think of is when the walls start closing in, so like 45, maybe 44. But
I mean, he's still made terrible mistakes at Stalingrad, though.
He has, but I don't. Maybe it's just how we view him in general. But I personally don't see Hitler at this point in the war as like a drug-addled mess. I still think he's making coherent decisions. Just a lot of them are fucking stupid and not making, and just don't really end up working. But you know, he. Remember when we've talked about Adolf Hitler in the episodes we've done Hitler, we say plenty of times he takes big risks and he gets pretty lucky because the majority of them end up working. The ones that don't kill him. But it's like basically it's basically just his luck turns in my mind. And then obviously at the end, then he starts losing his marbles, and then he was never going to be able to do anything.
Potentially the reason why Hitler keeps postponing, despite the need for newer tanks and more tanks and reinforcements and refreshing the men on the front line. Maybe he's doubting himself. He's had a really, really bad defeat at Stalingrad, despite the fact that he was ordering his men to stay there and take the city. And he has this kind of like firm belief in the Aryan super race that they can hold this city against these like barbaric Soviet invaders. And I guess his ego's taking a hit, and his maybe his self-awareness or his confidence taking a hit after this bad decision. And maybe be going immediately in March and pushing for Operation Citadel straight away and attacking the Soviet lines before they're fully defended or fortified would have been the right call. But because of Stalingrad, he's postponing and delaying, and he's not really believing himself when he's lost that Hitler that you had in 1941 and 1940 who took these massive risks to get massive rewards. Yeah, I guess it's sort of the exact same thing you're saying. Also, Joe, you love the sky. You love a good plane. There's this air battle that's happening.
Oh, is there Stukas? Are there Stukas in this fucker?
There are Stukas. There are plans for Stukas to bomb the enemy strong points. The Soviets are bringing new fighter models that can match the Luftwaffe, and their pilots getting better. There's this air battle that takes place at the same time as this Kursk operation, because it's all combined arms warfare. It's all planes and tanks and men and signals and intelligence back then. Everything together makes the perfect operation. So there's this air battle going on constantly over the fields of Kursk the entire time, and thousands and thousands of aircraft are lobbed into that battle. So let's just give a little roundup of the numbers. The Germans have around 900,000 men, 3,900 tanks, 8,300 air guns, and 1,800 aircraft in total. Not all of them take part.
3,900 tanks and 1,800 aircraft.
Yeah, but not all of them take part in Operation Citadel. There might be other parts of the line or in reserves, but they have them kind of, that is part of their forces.
That's a lot of money right there.
A lot of money, yeah. And considering the German economy is like completely demolished by this point because of the bombing campaign in Europe. Oh, I forgot the entire time the Germans have had their fighting in North Africa, and they're getting bombed in Europe, and they have Sicily's being invaded literally as this battle starts in Kursk. Meanwhile, the Red Army has one front. They got one front to fight on, and they have 2.6 million troops, almost 9,000 tanks, 5,900 aircraft, and a whopping almost 50,000 artillery guns taking part in this battle. We're coming up to the 5th of July, and the guns open up. Massive artillery bombardments from the Germans and counter-bombardments from the Soviets ring loudly as each side attempts to batter the opposing side defenders and attackers before the battle begins. Imagine that, the sound of tens of thousands of artillery guns opening up at 4:30 in the morning, the earth shaking. Literally magnitude earthquakes happening around the area. You can probably feel it back in Poland as the ground shakes, this violent opening of explosiveness. And at 5:30 a.m. on the 5th of July, the 9th Army opened their attack at the Battle of Kursk. Huge numbers of tanks and soldiers begin their thrust along the north face of the Kursk salient. There's mined terrain and fortified positions from the Red Army that slow their advance of this lumbering mass of German steel. But by 8 a.m., safe lanes are cleared through the minefield, and the Germans find weaknesses caused by the preliminary bombardments and redeploy Tigers to strike this area. The Russians then counter with 90 T-34s, and this results in a 3-hour battle where the Germans absolutely destroy the Red Army counterparts. This 3-hour battle, though, gives the Russians enough time to redeploy and cover this weakness in their lines. But despite this, the Germans still managed to break through the first defensive line on the first day and the second defensive line on the second day. The Germans under Volsa-Model concentrate their fire around the towns of Ponyuri and Olkovatka. Rokossovsky The Red Army general for the north face of the salient pulls men from other parts of the sector to defend these two locations. Fierce house-to-house combat descends on these two towns before Soviet counterattack eventually forces the Germans to withdraw. The Germans eventually secure the town, but the intensity of the fighting around this town, these towns of Ponary and Olkovadka, leads to heavy casualties on both sides, but being referred to as mini Stalingrad. By the 9th of July,
because of how close it was.
Yeah, just how fierce the fighting was, how intense it was, the huge casualties both sides are taking. And by the 9th of July, halted in their advance and can't penetrate anymore the Soviet positions in the north. So that's the north face of the salient. On the southern face of the salient, you thought the north face was bad. The southern face is a fucking nightmare. On the southern face of the salient, at 4 a.m., the Germans begin their bombardment. Manstein delivers his main attack through General Hoff's 4th Panzer Army, which is referred to by the Wehrmacht as the most powerful striking force ever assembled under a German commander. Supposedly, and I'm not sure about this, but more shells are fired by the German forces at the beginning of the Battle of Kursk and the southern salient in 50 minutes than the entire Polish and French campampaigns, which took months to complete.
50 minutes?
I know.
Imagine seeing the sky. Imagine being on a hill.
I know.
Like a Ukrainian or Russian that's like just got found, like seeing all this. I mean, you'd probably run away. You're not gonna stay and watch it. But imagine you're just like on a hill and you're just watching all this chaos rain down on this town. It'd be unbelievable.
You know, not only that, but you have Stuka dive bombers in the air screaming as they fight. They're dropping bombs. There are testimonies from eyewitnesses from Red Army soldiers. And they're just saying, like, I've never heard such sounds or felt such feelings in my life. I was shaking with literal fear, completely terrified. I wanted to run, but I'm a sergeant. I can't run. And you have this, like, they're basically under intense bombardment, the most intense probably they would have ever felt in their lives at the start of this battle, in the morning of this battle. But they do their duty, I guess. And I guess there's also something to be said about Red Army soldiers not being able to retreat because they'll be shot if they do. We often talk about imagining the scale and what it would feel like and the bravery of soldiers on the ground, but like undergoing this like intense bombardment, you just can't imagine how 90% of the people didn't just grab their guns and run away. But I guess they all feel like it's a battle for survival and they have to do their duty. I can't imagine ever being in that position, having to do that. And you thank yourself for being born in what's quite tumultuous time, this like incredibly privileged modern era.
Yeah, and well, not only that, but we are not the perfect nation in terms of geography, but to be on an island is pretty luxurious, honestly. Like when you consider, like, if you're Ukrainian, if you've been born in Ukraine, you are next to this power that thinks you should be part of it. And also that, it's just a plain, like, it's very dangerous to live in these types of countries. We are luxurious in the sense that at least we live on an island, which made it difficult in World War II for the Germans to attack, and even now, and obviously there's many ways that war can happen, so I'm not saying we're totally safe. As Brits, we do have many more luxuries than maybe others might.
Yeah, imagine me from South Sudan.
Do you know what the number one safest country in the world is, in terms of geography? And obviously geopolitics as well. This is a little bit unfair because it's subjective, but I think there's a pretty clear answer, because I'm actually reading a book on geography and geopolitics, so I feel like I could actually answer this question.
I would say, on the face of it, it's Iceland.
No, and this is a bit unfair because maybe I'm making it sound like geography is the most important. No, Ireland's had trouble with us for ages. We could just play them in a heartbeat. It's not Europe. It's a power in another part of the world.
Power,
when I say it, you'll be like, oh yeah.
Well, it's either the US or Japan then, I guess.
The United States. Yeah, I mean the United States is, if there was a lottery,
the Atlantic on one side, the Pacific on the other.
There are two ocean power, which I don't think any other country.
I thought it was too obvious, by the way.
Well, that's what I mean. It's a bit unfair for me to ask it because it's kind of how I'm asking the question. But if obviously Canada and Mexico also include in this, but America is a two ocean power. They're able to display power on both sides, and the only land borders they have are with neighbours that are way less powerful than they are. And the land itself is so industrialised, so well connected, and way too big. I mean, literally, if China or Russia or anyone actually tried to fight America, they would never ever be able to invade it properly. Like, it's just real. The chance of that actually happening is zero, almost 0%. So America is the one that you could argue have won the lottery on that sense. But as Brits, we are pretty high up that part, and that's why Russia feels quite. Again, in this book that I'm reading, that's part of the reason why Russia often feels so threatened, is because you have the Ural Mountains on one side, and that's a pretty good geographic barrier to stop them from Asia. But in the west, in Europe, it's just the Great European Plain. So it's like you can get to Moscow just through planes from France or so. So it's
planes in PLAINS, not PLANES.
Yeah, but it's just it's pretty scary. So it's like they take that stuff very, very seriously. While at least in Britain we have a few rivers and oceans or channels that are protecting us.
Yeah, I guess taking it back to the episode subject as well, that's the thing about Kursk, it's all just flat land. It's completely flat land, basically. I mean, of course, there's foxholes and craters from the bombing, but like it is, and despite the fact there might have been like rains and muddiness, it's summer. So the ground's firm and it's lots of clear land to stage a perfect Panzer strike on. So we're back to the southern phase of the salient in Kursk, where the battle's ensuing. The 2nd SS Panzer Division clashed with the 1st Guards Tank Army in a 4-hour battle on the first day, and the divisions breached the perimeter of the 2nd Soviet offensive line. On 8th of July, the Germans have knocked out over 340 tanks at a cost of 20 of their own tanks, and they're pushing forward fast. But the Soviet artillery and readiness and their anti-tank positions they fortified decimate some of the heavy tanks that Germans are utilising for this push. The fighting around some of the areas in the southern sector sees literal hand-to-hand fighting as German infantry literally drag Russians from their foxholes with this lightning-fast blitzkrieg war. They essentially swarm them at points. They make up ground, but ultimately when you look down from like a top-down view, the progress is slow compared to earlier in the war where they're just pushing into France. They've taken half of it in a week. It's slow. They've taken about 20 kilometers, if that. Not much ground, so kind of similar to like World War I, very attrition focused, despite the fact there's tanks that exist. The Soviets, in retaliation, commit nearly all of their reserves to the south to this region and leads to intense fighting as the Red Army counterattack with the 5th, 10th, 3rd and 2nd Tank Corps against the 2nd and 3rd SS Divisions. But a combination of German air power and ground forces rebuff the Soviet counterattack. But what it does do is stall the advance of the Germans.
You said this is the biggest battle in terms of men and also tanks and stuff. Now, it might not be the biggest casualties, that's Stalingrad or some other battles that we talked about, but the thing about Stalingrad is, because it's in a city, you have loads of little hidey places, you have loads of ways to protect yourself, so if people die, you can grab their bodies and bring them out. But this is a plain, and sure, there might be some buildings occasionally.
Well, there's hills. There's hills. There are a number of hills that like they're fighting over. I guess my point is this battle doesn't last. This is going to take longer than a day. I'm right in thinking that it takes roughly around a month, right? Yeah, so it's 6 weeks roughly.
So basically, when you think about it, like they can't clear the tanks. They can't. The biggest tank battle ever. They don't have time to start clearing tanks out the way.
There's a wreckage of thousands of tanks.
Yeah, the picture I'm imagining in my mind, the visceral picture is like thousands of tanks, thousands of machinery, surely thousands, if not more, of bodies just everywhere. Because how are you going to move them out? I mean, this seems like a hellscape. This sounds like to me.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you can imagine what it might look like in some of the fiercest parts on the North Pocket near Ponyry and Orkovatka, and in the southern salient near the town of Prokhorovka, the mess. I mean, there are towns, right? There are small towns on the way to Kursk. The fighting never actually gets to Kursk. It's like Kursk is the name of the battle, I guess, because it's the closest city. But really, it's these towns that see the majority of the battles. But yeah, you're right. Around these towns, there'll just be this littered mess of tanks and rubble and remains and I guess the stench as well. So yeah, and back to the battle anyway. The Germans begin rerouting divisions to the west, and they direct the Wehrmacht to advance towards Prokhorovka. By July 11th, the Germans push through the 3rd Soviet line defences in a surprise night attack. And the 3rd line is the final line of Soviet fortifications that they made, by the way. Now, in the meantime, while it looks like the Germans are succeeding in their objectives, really they're encountering too much resistance and their losses are looking too troublesome. They're starting from a position of weakness anyway, and despite their technological superiority and the potential doctrinal superiority on the ground, they can't really keep up with the casualties. And even with the huge casualties the Red Army taking millions of casualties, the Germans can't really keep up, whereas the Red Army can just like reinforce and resupply and recover. And that's the beauty of having a population of 100 million this time with a huge industrial base and no other fronts to worry about, because the Germans have to think about the Western Front and Italy and North Africa. But I digress anyway. The next critical juncture of the operation is the battle around Prokhorovka. and intense fighting develops around this town on the southern side of the salient, around 100 kilometers, a couple hours drive, if that, from Kursk itself. On the morning of the 12th of July, the 5th Guards Tank Army, ahead of the planned Soviet counter-offensives that are later due to come, are radioed by their commander Rotmitstrov, "Steel, steel, steel," which is an order to commence the attack with a massive amount of tank brigades, around 5 of them, to advance on Prokhorovka. They clash with the Germans' 3rd Panzer Division, 3rd SS Panzer Division, that is, and they completely overwhelm their positions. The German accounts on the battle suggest they're literally in their foxholes, fighting man to man. They're 1 second on their own, next second there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably not that many, but tens of thousands of Red Army soldiers and thousands of tanks and artillery pieces bearing down on them, the might and weight of the Red Army. But the Germans fantastically, I don't know what I'm saying, it's not a good thing they regain their composure, but the Germans regain their composure and they completely decimate the tanks, taking out over 300 of them at a loss of around just 12 themselves, of which later 8 are recovered, so really only 4. And the Soviets have to fall back in the south ahead of planned counter-offensives because
that's a huge win there. Sorry for the
huge, because Rotmitstrov wants to jump the gun. I guess that speaks to the gamble, right? This could potentially be like war winning for the Germans if they get this right.
Yeah,
but really, Operation Citadel by this point is all but over. The Germans can't advance any further, and at the same time, the Allies invade Sicily, sparking huge concerns to the Nazi high command that the Western Front is about to be opened up, which it does in Italy as they invade not too long after. So Hitler gets Kluge and Manstein, who are 2 of his generals, gets into his headquarters and tells them to stop the offensive and reroute forces from Kursk to Italy. Manstein believes this is a fatal error. He thinks they're on the verge of a breakthrough, and they genuinely might be on the southern side. If they had more commitment, pulled their reserves in, but Hitler's too worried about Italy. But after 3 more days of fighting, that results in the last offensive operation, Operation Roland, where Panzer divisions encircle the 69th Red Army Division, but they actually failed to eliminate the pocket they encircled. Operation Citadel is finally called off on 17th of July, and the Luftwaffe regiments have pulled away, and they had about 40% of the Air Force there. They now only got 25% of it, and Hitler is just growing increasingly worried about the Western Front. The offensives from the Germans, the final offensive based on the Eastern Front for the rest of the war, there are little ones here and there, but the big, major, final offensive on the Eastern Front of the Second World War is over, and the Soviets counterattack.
God, that must have been a very stressful few moments in some of those individual battles where, say, like, you know, the Germans starting to make like a tiny bit more push than they were expecting, or they really get a huge win out of nowhere. And I feel like, considering how on a tightrope the war had been at certain points, especially in Stalingrad, I bet some of the like high command Soviet generals were thinking like, oh God, please, leave us alone. Come on, give us a break.
Yeah, probably. But I think Zhukov's feeling confident. Like, he's just such a smart general. Like, there's a reason why Stalin could never purge him. It's because he was just a fucking genius.
And he's there at the death of Stalin, played by Jason Isaacs.
Unbelievable scene. If you haven't seen that, go on YouTube and type in Zhukov introduction, death of Stalin, and it is quality. It's so good.
He's got like the biggest amount of medals ever, and he pushes them down. It's so good.
It's iconic. So the final German offensive is over. The Second World War on the Eastern Front, the final major offensive, and the Soviets counterattack. In the north, they launch Operation Kutuzov on the 12th of July, and they thrust through the northern face of the salient to attack the German units that push through. They take enormous casualties, but they achieve significant breakthroughs in the northern part of the Battle of Kursk. They threaten the German Ninth Army with encirclement, and they push the Germans in the northern sector completely back on the defensive. In the south, they conduct the biggest offensive in 1943, and that's Operation Polkovodets Rumyantsev, which means commander of Rumyantsev, aiming to destroy the 4th Panzer Army and the Panzer Detachment Kampf while cutting off army groups south in the Caucasus. They amass 1 million men and thousands of guns and tanks and push through the German lines, threatening to encircle them, and by the 5th of August, the Red Army have liberated Belgorod and Orel, marking the first time the Soviets have succeeded in a summer offensive.
Whoa.
Yeah, 2 years in, they finally had a success, yeah. Blimey. On the 12th of August, the Soviets are stopped by the 2nd and 3rd Panzer divisions on the outskirts of Kharkov, where they suffer heavy losses, and the Soviet casualties are incredibly high in this 4th Battle of Kharkov, outside the outskirts of the city. They lose roughly 250,000 men at the upper estimate to the Germans' 26,000. They lose thousands of tanks, guns, and aircraft. They succeed, though, And that directly leads to the German forces in Ukraine falling behind the Dnieper River, setting the stage for the Soviet push into Ukraine and the later advances into Eastern Europe. Kharkov is eventually liberated on 23rd of August, and the Germans need to pull their men back to stop massive encirclements. Hitler does, however, learn from Stalingrad, and he instructs Manstein to leave Kharkov so they're not encircled.
So his ego, he's finally learned from his ego. Yeah. He's doing a bit of a off the ramp fucking play there. He's like, okay, well, maybe I'm not right about everything.
Yeah.
Bring him back.
Basically.
That would have hurt for his ego.
And,
Jesus.
Yeah. And that's the end of the Battle of Kursk. The Battle of Kursk involves around close to 10,000 tanks, upwards of 3 million troops, thousands of aircraft, tens of thousands of artillery pieces and guns. Historians still debate the actual figure and the death toll and the equipment losses over the course of the month-and-a-half-long battle. We probably don't have a real clear picture of what it looked like and how many casualties there actually were. Historians are starting to think that the Russians suffered far worse casualties than we initially thought they did because of Russian propaganda, but around 1.2 million Red Army soldiers are killed or wounded at the very least. Over 7,000 tanks and 3,000 aircraft are lost. The Germans lose around 203,000 either dead, wounded or missing. 1,200 tanks and guns lost and 650 aircraft lost. The Red Army have taken really enormous losses, and while they failed to complete all their objectives, it is, despite the huge casualties on the Russian side, an incredible German loss at this battle. The Red Army continue pushing, they gain the operational initiative on the ground, and this eventually leads to the victory on the Eastern Front from this battle onwards.
So basically, like, if Stalingrad was the turn of the tide, this is like where the push begins, like the proper push into, like, you know, they're never really stopped again. I mean, obviously there's skirmishes that slow them down, but like from this point onwards, the Soviets are like on the march towards Berlin.
Absolutely, yeah. Like the German losses are huge. The Red Army losses are far higher. But like I said before, the Germans just can't recuperate from that. They can never recover. It's like the Somme. The Somme in World War One was like, you know, arguably essentially a stalemate. It was a rough British victory. But the losses that the Germans incurred, they couldn't replenish. Whereas, you know, the French and the English together can sustain. They can endure it.
Especially when the Americans get involved.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we're about to open up the Western Front with D-Day as well and invade Italy. Yeah. So the Germans just can't react to this again. And the Soviets have this enormous manpower pull back home, and their industrial capability is growing and growing as they, you know, they take back land and build factories again and move everything to the Urals or back from the Urals back to Moscow. And that's it. They just can't fight on anymore. Whereas the Soviets are really hitting their stride. And they're going on their way to becoming the most powerful army we probably will ever see, I guess, on mainland Europe at this time. I mean, there's a main reason we started NATO. That's because the Red Army become this huge behemoth by the end of the war because of battles like Kursk.
Very battle hardened as well.
Very battle hardened, yeah. Just one last thing before we close out this episode, but I just want to kind of do a bit of revisionism here because I think I've kind of checked myself, but I said it earlier, but people say generally in history, historians look at Hitler and they say he's limited the ability of his generals because his generals are incredibly successful people. They're very smart. Manstein, Guderian, and Rommel, like really intelligent, really capable generals. Some of the best. And the thought is like Hitler has limited them the whole time, and he got it wrong constantly, and that he waited to initiate Operation Citadel and then pulled forces around willy-nilly, prevented the Germans from actually like winning and actioning their gains they made on the day of the Battle of Kursk. But I think it's important to state that this isn't really the case. Like the generals are pulling him around and telling him they're not ready, and he was fascinated by technology, yes, and wanted more technological advanced tanks to come to the Battle of War, but ultimately he's just been like kind of caught between the minds of two of his generals or three of his generals who are giving him different thoughts, and he can't really make up his mind because he's listening to the expert advice. But maybe there's an argument to say that if he didn't listen to them and act on instinct like he did before, the Battle of Kursk might have been a different outcome altogether. But that's it's not really based on anything. It's just a bit of thought I've had after reading about some of the instances that he had to debate his generals about the outcome, what the battle would look like, and how the operation would start. But yeah, I think it's just an important thing to note. And that's it. That's the Battle of Kursk, Joe. And what do you think? Do you think it probably was the most important battle of World War II?
Important? I don't know. I still think Stalingrad is. I get that, you know, I think you kind of outed it at the beginning. You said this might not have been the battle that decides if the Nazis lose, but it's certainly the battle that decides if they are able to create a stalemate or not. And I would argue that even if they had won Kursk, I think it still would have been very difficult, especially considering that the Americans were going to get the Manhattan Project and the bomb before Germany. that the Germans would have somehow been able to survive the war regardless. So I do honestly think that, all in all, Stalingrad is a bigger moment in terms of the grand scheme of World War II, but I do think there's a real gravity to the fact that this is the most troops, the most tanks, the most armoured units being attacked at the same time. The opening day of the battle, July the 5th, 1943, was the single costliest day in the history of aerial warfare in terms of aircrafts shot down, which makes sense, of course, but that's a pretty cool stat as well. It's like, my God, like, if you were there on that opening day of this offensive, or this moment, this battle that's pretty epic and big, suddenly you would just see, like, planes falling out the sky like nobody's business. It's actually kind of insane to think about it. Imagine being there and seeing it. It's like, man,
yeah, not only seeing this like enormous mass and horde of tanks from either side, but you're also seeing, not because the altitude would be fairly low from these planes, you'll probably be able to see them dogfighting. You see hundreds or tens of planes at any given time fighting away.
Obviously, war is hell, and I'm not advocating for it, but I would say this battle probably would make a really good movie, a really good war movie.
Yeah.
Like, especially with modern tech and modern, CGI and everything. I think like everything about this sounds like it's just the most ridiculous spectacle. It'd be like nothing you've ever seen before in your life, and apparently never seen since, because, like I say, it's one of the costliest days and one of the biggest battles. So
that's it. Thank you for sitting with me for that. It's actually a bit of a change of pace from my usual episodes, because I think we're usually a bit more lighthearted, but that was quite a heavy episode. But I guess it's quite a heavy subject. I mean, it feels to me very similar to Stalingrad.
Are your episodes lighthearted? Sorry, I swear the last few episodes you've done is Iwo Jima and the Holocaust.
Oh shit! Yeah, you're so right. You're so right.
It was World War II heavy as well.
Oh, you're right, yeah.
This is such a change of pace from my usual World War II
really
heavy episodes
episode
about a battle or something dramatic that happened. It's like, yeah, so different.
Yeah, you're absolutely bang on. You got me dead to rights there. Typically you do frequently get me dead to rights, but that's a good one there. You caught me. But yeah, thank you guys for listening and sticking with it, and I hope you've learned something new about the Battle of Kursk and you've enjoyed listening to me ramble on at you for an hour. And if you haven't already, please follow and like us and on all different platforms, and tell your friends and everyone about how good we are. Leave a review and comment on us and email us and tell us what you want to see in future episodes, because no one's done that yet. That would be nice.
Well, that's not true. We do occasionally get stuff, but it is quite rare. But usually no one's listening by the end of the episode, so this stuff just gets completely flat out the water. But if you are somehow listening, then thank you very much. We'll see you in the next episode, and we hope you enjoyed our talk about the Battle of Kursk. See you later.
See you later. Bye.